When longtime Dallas Cowboy fans hear the name Charlie Waters, it evokes images of a ball-hawking safety who was one of the greatest defensive players to ever don the silver and blue. During the 1970s, Waters was a critical part of the Doomsday Defense that helped the Cowboys earn 5 trips to the Super Bowl and win 2 championships. He retired after the 1981 season and pursued various interests, including work as a broadcaster and a coach. Where is Charlie Waters today? After a career at Clemson University as a quarterback and an All-ACC wide receiver, the Dallas Cowboys selected Charlie Waters in the 3rd round of the 1970 NFL Draft as a defensive back. He backed up fellow rookie Cliff Harris to start the season until Harris left for military duty. Waters then stepped in and started 6 games that year. By season's end, he led the team with 5 interceptions, made the All-Rookie team, and set the table for what Cowboy fans could expect for the next decade. Waters was a stalwart in the secondary for Tom Landry's defense. Working with Harris, the duo struck fear into opposing receivers, who knew anytime they caught a pass, it came with a price. When Waters wasn't delivering big hits, he was often intercepting passes. He finished his career with 50 interceptions, including an NFL-tying best 9 in the playoffs, and his second all-time in Cowboys history, behind only Hall of Famer Mel Renfro and his 56 picks. Not surprisingly, one of Waters' career highlights involved interceptions, 3 to be exact, and it came during the 1977 playoffs when the Cowboys hosted Walter Payton and the Chicago Bears.
That's the football conference playoff game. I hold the record for most interceptions in a game of 3 against the Chicago Bears in Dallas. And that was a big moment for me that I reflect on a lot of times, thinking, golly, how fortunate I was to have a great pass rushing lineman on my team that put pressure on the quarterback that made it easier for us to take chances in the secondary.
Waters not only understands how fortunate he was to play with such a dominant pass rush, but with one of the greatest coaches in NFL history in Tom Landry. It was Landry who had the vision to convert the offensive player in college to a defensive back. Landry was a fair but tough coach, and exactly what Waters wanted for his career. It paid off with a decade of success. However, it was that same toughness of his coach that caused a rift between the two when Waters retired and wanted to coach with the Cowboys, but Landry insisted that he first take a psychological exam.
I regret to this day not ever taken a coaching job that Coach Landry offered me after my career was over. He wanted me to take a psychological test so he could find out what kind of person I was, and I was thinking, what? After all the years I spent and doing everything you say and just worshiping him, and you're going to take the psychological test to find out what kind of person I am?
Waters instead opted to work in the broadcast booth for a time before he returned to Dallas to work in real estate. He finally made his coaching debut in the mid-1980s with the Denver Broncos and former Dallas coach Dan Reeves. He coached with the Broncos for 7 seasons before joining the University of Oregon, where he worked as the defensive coordinator for a season before tragedy struck. His oldest son Cody unexpectedly died. Waters left coaching behind and returned to Texas. Back in the Lone Star State, Waters eventually reunited with his former teammate Cliff Harris, working at a company in the oil and gas industry. They worked together for years. The two former defensive stars have been best of friends for 50 years now and still regularly talk. Late last summer, Waters had the honor of introducing his best friend at his Pro Football Hall of Fame induction.
And I felt honored, and that's the closest I'm going to ever get to being in the Hall of Fame. But I really loved doing it for Cliff, and tried my best to give him his due, what he's due, because he was well deserving.
Just weeks later, it was Harris who sat out in the audience while Waters was inducted into the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. Today, Waters does, by his own admission, as little as he possibly can. That allows him to focus on his lifetime love of art, where he draws and paints, his latest passion working with art resin. He has numerous items on display and available for purchase at a gallery in Dallas. It might sound odd that a former star football player for America's team would pursue art. However, when you stop and think about it, it makes complete sense. For a decade, Texas Stadium was his canvas, and each Sunday, he and his Doomsday Defense teammates would step out onto the bright green turf in their silver and blue uniforms, and in unison, they would craft a beautiful display of dominance, including 2 masterpieces.